Good evening. It's good to see you all here. I've been hearing all day long about how, oh man, dude, people, when it's raining, people don't go to church, people stay at home, they lock the doors, they just don't know what to do with it. And this is not rain. You do realize this, don't you? If you want to know what rain looks like, you can just fly home with me. Unless your windshield wipers are on the highest setting, then it can qualify as rain. But if not, I don't know. But I'm glad you guys made it. You are brave and courageous and faithful and wonderful, and we're all here. This is good. Guys, it is such a privilege to be here with you guys. I get asked every now and again about why I travel and where I like to travel to, and Hawaii is at the top of my list. And every time I say Hawaii, everyone rolls their eyes and says, "Well, no, duh," oh, it's so hard for you to go to Hawaii. But the reason why I love coming here has nothing to do with your palm trees or beaches or oceans. It really has to do with you as a people. And I had a great long conversation with many leaders over at Grace Bible Honolulu, and it just seems to be true across the island, across this Grace Bible family. There's such a warm spirit here. When you guys say Ohana, you really mean it. And it's refreshing. It's refreshing, especially coming from the Northwest and the mainland in general. And so I don't want you all, I know that sometimes when you're just in it all the time, you may not fully appreciate it. But coming from my vantage point, it's real and it's awesome. And it is a super pleasure to be in it and around it. I'm always inspired by it. I always go back to my church better than when I came. And so I'm thanking you guys for that and the privilege of being able to be here with you. And when I started considering what I wanted to say to you guys tonight, and when I started praying about what the Holy Spirit wanted to say to you guys tonight, I realized many of you were at the conference this past week. In fact, just how many of you guys actually attended any part of the conference this past week? Yeah, a good number of you guys. I know it wasn't everyone here, but a number of you did. And every time we get to these moments where we have these amazing conferences and God moves and shakes and does some really cool stuff in our life, it's always a powerful moment. And so I was trying to think of what would be most appropriate to help cap this moment and help to seal it in the most appropriate way so that it has its most lasting and enduring impact on our life. And as I was praying, all that just kept coming to my mind is Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7. That's a hint. Turn to Luke chapter 7. Did you catch it? It wasn't subtle. Luke chapter 7. Luke 7, we're going to read the story about a woman who washes Jesus' feet. And some of you that are familiar with the Bible may know this story. And others of you that maybe haven't read through the whole Bible or haven't read very much of the Bible at all, we're just so fantastically glad that you're here. Thanks for being a part of this. This is really awesome. And this story, one of the advantages you have if you have not read the Bible, if you've not heard the story before, you've got an incredible advantage that, quite frankly, I'm quite jealous of. You have the ability tonight to hear something with fresh eyes and fresh ears. Isn't it true, if you've been in the church game a little while, isn't it true that sometimes we get a little bit numb to this stuff? Isn't it? There's a great quote I once heard by a man named Dallas Willard that says, "Familiarity breeds unfamiliarity." Meaning simply like, the more you're around and exposed to something, the more easy it is to become callous and numb to it. And so the beautiful thing, if you think you're walking in here and you really don't feel like you fit very high on the totem pole of spirituality and whatnot, I just got to tell you, there's a beautiful thing to being exposed to the words of Jesus, afresh and anew. And your lens that you get to see things through tonight is amazing. And many of us are going to attempt to put ourselves in that same position tonight as we look in this passage, no matter how many times we've seen it before, deeply praying that the Holy Spirit would reveal something fresh and something new. So that's what we're going to go for tonight and seeing how Jesus might want to speak to us. So let's go to Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7, and we're going to start in verse 36. So I'm going to read this whole story because it's just such a good story. My goodness, if you've never read this before, you should totally read the Bible. It's where it's at. So here's the story. When one of the Pharisees, who was a religious leader in Jesus' day, one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, He went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and then she wiped them with her hair and kissed them and poured perfume on them. Now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were really a prophet, he would know who was touching him or what kind of a woman this lady is, that she is a sinner. Jesus answered him, dude, Simon, I got something to tell you. And then Simon said, okay, tell me, teacher. Surely this will be a fun little conversation. Which is right when you know, Jesus, when Jesus says, hey, I got something to tell you, just get ready for the gut punch, right? Like it's just coming. It's coming. It's like the Jaws theme song music should be in your head, right? You're just wearing a meat necklace in the middle of the ocean. It's just coming. Here it is. So Jesus says, 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now, which of them do you think will love him more? Jesus asked. Simon replied, well, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven? Jesus said, bingo, you got it. And then he turned towards the woman, and he said to Simon, do you see this woman? Remember that question. Do you see her? I came into your house. You didn't give me any water from my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You didn't put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love is shown. But whoever has been forgiven little, loves little. Then Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. And the other guests began saying among themselves, hold on a moment. Who is this who even forgives sins? And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. What a story. I tell you, Jesus is the real deal, man. Now, the beautiful part about this story is how little needs to be said about it to understand it. I love teaching the Bible. I love reading the Bible. I love studying the Bible. And to be fair with you, most of the Bible requires some pretty intentional study. Having a good teacher at your side is really helpful. There's some passages in the Bible that you flip open to in the middle of Leviticus and you're thinking to yourself, dear God, what does this mean for me in my life? Because all I see is blood and goats and bodily fluids everywhere. And I don't know. I just don't know what I am here for. But this passage, it's really straightforward. The beautiful part about the Bible is so many people want to get hung up on the stuff they don't understand and let that stop them from trusting and loving God. But there's enough of the Bible that's clear to understand to help you wade through the stuff that you don't. Case in point. Now, what's going on in the scenario is very, very common for Jesus. Jesus hung out with a lot of people, and he shared meals with a lot of people. In fact, if you're interested in doing Bible studies, just because you're a Bible nerd like me, you can actually do a little research project, and you go read through the Gospel of Luke and find out every time there's a dinner party, because Luke actually has a theme that you can trace. There are 7 dinner parties that Jesus has in the Gospel of Luke, and each of them have a very significant theme that he's wanting to address. In this particular instance, it follows a pattern that seems to go across the board every time Jesus has encounters with people. Oftentimes, you'll see Jesus in encounters with 2 different kinds of people. In this case, you have Jesus and you have the sinful woman, but that's just a polite way of calling her a prostitute. Jesus, a prostitute and a Pharisee. Jesus, a prostitute and a Pharisee. Or to put it maybe more in a general terms, you've got Jesus, you've got a bad woman, you've got maybe who would be classically defined as a good man, and you have these polar opposites on either side with Jesus in between. Some of us might think of this on kind of religious terms and think, well, we have an unrighteous woman, we have a righteous man, and then we have Jesus. Some of you might think, well, we have a screw-up, we have a do-gooder, and we have Jesus. But this is the split that Jesus often deals with in terms of dealing with two basic types of general characters in the story. But Jesus does in this story what he does in nearly every story. Because what everybody assumes when they're reading the story, and what Simon the Pharisee assumes as he's sitting at this dinner table, is that he's the good guy, she's the bad guy, and Jesus should be able to figure out who's who in the zoo. If he's really a prophet, he should absolutely know who was washing his feet at this moment. And in case you're a little bit fuzzy on maybe what this scene looks like, I actually brought an image with me because some of us think like, well, this is kind of weird because there's a table. Is she like under the table? And like, how is that happening? That seems a little bit weird and creepy. Well, it kind of is a little bit, no way around that. It's a little bit of a cultural distance from us. But do we have that image? Can we put that up? Can we put that up? Yes? No? Maybe? Excellent. You guys are awesome. So here's an image of what a meal in Jesus' day would have looked like. And as you can see, the table is actually down very, very low. You wouldn't sit in a chair. You would recline at the table, which means that you would lean on your left side. You would lay down on your left side, facing in towards the table. You would, of course, lay down on your left side so that you would have your right hand free in order to be able to eat, because you would use your left hand for other things. Sorry, potty humor. It just goes like, I have 4 young kids at home, potty humor. You use your right hand to eat. Now you can see how in this picture, if Jesus were sitting around this table, that of course he's facing all of the guests at the dinner table, and if a woman was to come into the room, she's going to have full access to his feet. It's just going to be very easy for her to get to them. Can you see this? It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. All you need to see is a basic little image. You can totally get the scene. And you could also get why Jesus might be so engrossed in conversation that he's really not even paying attention to what somebody's doing with his feet behind him. Maybe he's not even looking back. And this is why Simon the Pharisee, he might be looking at Jesus and he could see the woman washing his feet. Jesus might be talking to him and he's thinking like, dude, Jesus. Like someone's messing with your feet, dog. Like, can you tune in for... And not just someone messing with your feet. This is a prostitute. And I somewhat apologize for using such crass language, but she's a whore. Every crass kind of connotation you want to develop is exactly what Simon's thinking here. And the idea isn't simply that she is exalting Jesus or making Jesus look better because she's serving him by washing his feet. The idea here is that she is polluting Jesus. She is actually getting her dirty, sinful, unclean hands all over him. So this is guilt by association. So as far as Simon the Pharisee is concerned, not only is he the righteous man in the room, but in this moment, he's questioning and wondering if he's not even more righteous than Jesus is. Which is why Jesus quickly tells the story. He says, Simon, Simon, 2 people owe a debt. One's big, one's little. Both of them get forgiven. You tell me which one will love more. What Jesus does as he stands up to Simon and reframes the whole scene. It is not one sinner and one righteous person in Jesus. Jesus says, no, let me tell you who's at the table. 2 sinners and me. Now, things are a bit different in our culture now. And if we were to approach some kind of a similar scene, what would our immediate gut reaction be? You get a little bit of a religious bigot in the room, someone who's intolerant and like judgmental. And you get a guy like Simon the Pharisee that's wanting to like ostracize a woman like her in the room. And in most places in our world today, people would be more quickly standing up for the woman than they would siding with Simon. Can we agree on that? Can we agree on that? Right? Nobody likes religious judgmental folk. I mean like nobody. Like 2 people from like one small church in the Appalachian Mountains. Like religious judgmental people. And the rest of us, we will ride against the religious folk. Like we want nothing to do with them. In fact, so much so that I think our culture, in my humble opinion, is actually swinging the pendulum so far the other way that anytime we even smell any judgmentalism, we don't try to correct it or balance it. We just try to erase all of it altogether. And do you know what Jesus does here, which was so controversial to modern ears? Do you realize what he does? He never, ever contradicts Simon and says, you're calling her a sinner?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
He says, no, yeah, you're right. Dude, her sin is bad. Her sin is bad. But you're a sinner too. Jesus doesn't erase the judgment. He just hands it out evenly. Because isn't that what we want to do? Isn't that what we want to do? We want to erase judgment to make ourselves feel better, right? Erase judgment. No, nobody should get judged. And Jesus is like, well, I get where you're going with that, and I'm just going to flip the script. How about everybody gets judged? Because her sin was external and obvious and broke some pretty extreme sexual boundaries. But his sin was internal and subtle and broke some pretty extreme social boundaries. He was arrogant. He was self-righteous. He was judgmental. And rather than erasing her sin, he's simply holding Simon accountable for his. Now, let's talk for a minute about why this is so significant. And I really want us to hear this. And I don't want you to just like turn off your brains. I actually want to put your thinking caps on here for a moment. Because think about this for a moment. I've been a Christian now for 16 years. I've been in full-time ministry for 16 years. I've been paid in full-time ministry for about 13 years. I have met enough people, ministered to enough people to know one thing that you all should know if you have even been a Christian for 1 minute, is that everybody has a story. You with me on this? Everybody has a story. Do little girls run around thinking to themselves, you know what I want to be when I grow up? Someone who sells my body for money. I want to spin around a pole with no clothes on. That's what every little girl dreams of. No, nobody dreams that way. What happens to little girls to make them make the kinds of dangerous life choices, self-harming? I'm not talking to just about sexual liberation, I'd be able to sleep with anyone, but this, everyone should agree, is dangerous sexual behavior. What makes people do this kind of a thing? I think it's more than that. I think something had to happen to her. And what was that something? Well, let's take a wild guess and just say dad. I'm going to guess 99%. With 99% accuracy, it's probably just dad. Either there was none or he was shady. And if it wasn't dad, just substitute any other dude in the mix. She got to where she is in life, not by her own ambition and life choices. Very few, if anyone ever in history, ever arrived where she arrived simply by saying, this is my dream and this is what I want, to sell my body. No, she has a story. But does Jesus acknowledge that? I would. I would say, oh man, tell me your story. Where'd you come from? Who hurt you? What did someone abuse you? Did someone molest you? Did someone abandon you? I would want to know that. This is true in our world. This is even more true in Jesus' world. Women did not have community college back then. They didn't have career opportunities back then. If you were molested, if you were raped, if you were abused, you did not have any way to feed yourself, because the best hope that you had once you became a grown woman was for a man to marry you and provide for you. I know that sounds really sexist and backwards, but you have to stop thinking so ethnocentrically, and you have to start imagining yourself 2,000 years ago. That's not the way God wanted the world. That's the way a fallen world became. And the reality is, through something probably of no fault of her own, she was unwanted by any man, and her choices were starvation or prostitution. You pick. So she sold herself. But does Jesus ever say, poor, poor woman, I could only imagine how much pain you've been through, and now you're being picked on by this nasty religious man. Let me just give you an awkward side hug, right? And I'll pray for you. Come on. No, think with me. Be honest for a moment. Doesn't that make more sense? That's what I do. I want to know people's stories. How did you get to where you are? I know you've got pain. I know it. But he doesn't do that. And why? Is he a jerk? Why? Why would he call her out for her sin? Why would he hold her accountable for her sin? He says, I forgive her, which is a statement of saying, no, she has lots of sin in her life, and she's accountable for it. She's just not going to pay the consequence for it. He didn't say excuse it. He didn't sweep it under the rug. He didn't say, well, it's understandable given where she's come from. What is he doing here? I've thought long and hard about this as a pastor over the last 10 years, and I think I'm finally getting it. Because you know what the most least helpful thing to do for someone is who has been through trauma in their life? Is to treat them like a victim who has no responsibility for their future. This prostitute has only ever been treated like a commodity her whole life. Jesus is the first one to come along who does not just simply say to her, you're a commodity, and he does not simply say to her, you're a victim. He holds her responsible for her sin. And you might think that's mean, or you might think that's rude. And I know many people in this room have experienced a kind of pain or abuse or molestation or all kinds of things that might fit in a similar story that she has, and you might be feeling some pain in this moment, even as we talk through it. But hear what Jesus is doing here. Hear, please, what Jesus is doing here. He does not allow the woman to settle into a victimhood that allows the past abuse to continue to define her life and her future. Because even though that abuse happened 20 years ago, if you remain a victim and you think everything is someone else's fault and you take no responsibility for the choices you make and how you respond, you will always be that victim. And you will lose your humanity. You will lose your dignity. And eventually, guess what happens? People stop seeing you. Which is why he asked Simon, do you see her? Do you see her? I do. To you, she's a commodity. To me, she's a woman. To me, she's a daughter. You don't see her, but I do. And I do what might seem mean on the front end, but it's actually what's going to heal her on the back end. I'm going to hold her accountable for her choices, and then I'm going to heal her of all the sin that's been done to her. But Jesus is insistent on this. And I know this is a tough pill for many of us to swallow. Because for many of us, our victimhood has become our weapon to defend ourselves with. We use our defensiveness and what's happened to us in the past to try to shield us from dealing with that pain and making better choices for our future. No matter what anyone has done to you in the past, you are always responsible for what you choose in your present. And the real trauma of our lives, any counselor worth their weight in anything will tell you this, the real trauma in our lives is not about what has happened to us. It's about how we respond to what happens to us. You'll never erase that scar. You'll never fully erase that pain. That'll always be in some way a part of who you are. But if you will choose not to slide down the inhumane and undignified path of becoming defined by that abuse, all you're doing is keeping that abuser in the place of victimizing you your entire life. Jesus humanizes her. He gives her dignity, because dignified human beings have choice and real responsibility, and refuses to allow her to think that she doesn't. And you see what he does? He props her up as an example. He shows her as this is what it looks like. This is what it really looks like to be right with God and right with me. This is what it really looks like. Because you know what she does? You know what she does? Let's just make a couple of observations here. Number one, she wept. She wept. Now, what was she doing with Jesus' feet? Washing his feet. Have you ever washed someone's feet with your tears? Think about this. I never thought about this before. Think about this before. Think about this. How many tears does it take to actually wash a filthy person's feet? Is this a polite cry? I'm like, my family's from the Midwest, good old like white folk. Like we don't cry. Like we don't show emotion. Like a nice little polite tear. She's bawling. This is an ugly cry, ladies. This is mascara all up everywhere, ladies. Correct? Faucets coming. Enough water to actually be able to wash a man's feet with. Filthy feet. She's weeping. She's weeping. Uncontrollably weeping. And she's weeping because she's not weeping because she hopes to be forgiven. Jesus says she's doing this because she believes she already has been forgiven. She says, what you don't get, Simon? She's not using her love as a tool to earn mine. She has received my love, and it's so overwhelming to her that she's lost it. I've had to, this is my 5th sermon in a few days. I got one more to go, so my voice is getting a little raspy. So I sound a little bit tougher than I normally do right now. Let me just assure you, I'm very masculine and tough. And you know that masculine, tough people have to tell you how masculine and tough they are. They wear glasses and skinny jeans too. So it's all, I'm just perping. I don't cry very much, is all I'm trying to say. I don't cry very much. Once every couple years, I think I had a good cry when my mom had a tumor in her brain. That was scary. When my childhood dog died several years back, I cried then. I've cried when things have happened to people that I love, or I've cried a couple times when circumstances have gotten so overwhelming I just don't know what to do and can't handle them. You know what I cannot remember? The last time I wept over my sin. I'm happy to cry about all kinds of things that happened to me. I can't think, except for when I was like a brand new Christian. Recently, in several years, the last time I actually wept because I was so overwhelmed by my own guilt and shame and how offensive I had been to God and how I betrayed Him to choose something far less than Him. And I've never allowed that to well up emotionally in me to the point where I would appropriately lose it the way this woman loses it. But she loses it. And Jesus says, yeah, because she knows how much she's been forgiven, man. She knows how long her bill is. And when you get a really long bill forgiven, it tends to affect you. You know, every single month I get bills. Every month I get bills. I get cell phone bills, mortgage bills, power bills, yacht bills, vacation home in the Caribbean bills. I get all those kinds of bills. Yup, like a boss. And every month I get these bills, every month. And they tell me what I owe. Every month they tell me what I owe, even though every month I pay. But they still remind me what I owe. What if God sent you a bill every month? For real though. What if He sent you a bill? What if He said, oh man, all right. I don't know about you. How many times have you heard people say, but dude, man, God knows my heart. Have you ever heard people say that? Have you ever said that? Be real. People think that's supposed to comfort them. It terrifies me. Like, it terrifies me. He knows your heart. He knows that even when you were smiling, you were thinking of how you're going to stab them, like, at the same time with a shiv or something. I don't know. Like, He saw how you gave, like, a little polite little response, but He knew the attitude you had in your heart. Come on now, every little lust-filled, like, perverse thing you've wanted to do to undignify and dehumanize another, He's seen all that. Every month, and the charges would be stacked up. What would you do with that bill? I mean, it's not like T-Mobile where you can call customer service and try to contest the charges, you know what I mean? Okay, so, well, here's the thing, God. I need half off on this bill because here's the thing. It was Craig and his mom and them, and it was this whole thing, and it wasn't all my fault. And you can't barter with God. The bill is the bill. And I'm telling you, the second you come to terms with how big your bill is, and that Jesus pays that bill freely, you're done. You're done. Like, drop the mic. Like, whoa. Like, you're either going to shout for joy or you're going to weep on a man's feet. You're going to do one of the two things, right? She loses it. Why? She loves Jesus, not because she's trying to get anything from him, because she believes she already has. Whoo! She wept. And you know the second thing she does? It's connected to the first. But she doesn't try to justify herself. She lets Jesus justify her. She lets someone else deal with what's wrong with her. She doesn't try to manage it herself. Do you know what the difference between guilt and shame is? I don't know if there's official definitions or whatever, but you know what I've become to understand them as being different as? I think guilt is a really good thing. Guilt is what keeps you from being a sociopath. Do you realize that? For becoming Dexter or someone like that? Like, it helps you. Right? From being Walter White, guilt is a good thing. You with me? Yeah. Shame is when you try to manage your own guilt. Shame is when you start trying to justify yourself and pay off your own guilt. And you carry it like a weight as an identity, and your failings become who you are. But this lady wanted nothing to do with shame. She felt her guilt, and because she came to terms with her guilt, she felt the freedom of forgiveness. And because she felt the freedom of forgiveness, shame was done and gone, and not even in the picture at all anywhere. She let Jesus pay the bill. She didn't try to earn it from him. She just believed simply that Jesus would pay it for her. And so Jesus simply announces, dude, the way she is loving me comes simply because she believes she's already been forgiven. She's already been. How do we sustain a committed life of loving Jesus? It's certainly not trying to manage our own guilt, justify our own actions, or just ignore our own pain. We maintain vibrancy with Jesus, not when we come up with a 3-step plan of all the things we need to do in order to curry God's favor or love in our life. We maintain our passion and love for Jesus when we believe that his passion and love is something we already have. You maintain your passionate love for Jesus when the second you've messed up for the 47th time in a month, you realize that his love and his grace is every bit as available to you as it's ever been. You maintain your unpassioned, dying love for Jesus when you realize that there is nothing to earn from him, just a forgiveness and a love to receive. And once you receive it, when you freely receive, loving him back will be the most natural, organic thing imaginable. You just won't be able to help yourself. You'll serve, you'll sign up to serve. You won't even like kids, but you'll serve in the kids ministry. Come on now. You'll give. You don't even have that much money, and you're a little bit in debt, but you'll just start giving money to the church and to folks, and you're like, you know what? It's Jesus's anyway. And he paid a debt I couldn't pay back. Everything I got is his now anyway, and I got clothes on my back. I got some loco mocha in my stomach. I'm good to go. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? We make this Jesus thing so complicated. It's not complicated. You gotta be kidding me. He forgives you and he loves you. And once you get how big your bill was and just how much he loved you, you love him back. The reason why you love little is because you believe you've been forgiven little. You think you got a small little debt. You think you've been a good little boy or girl. You think you've done all the right things. You think you're not that bad. And Jesus looks at Simon in the same way he looked at you. And it's not whether or not your bill is big or little. It's whether you believe it is big or little. And to be frank with you, I don't even care how big my bill is. That's up to Jesus, and I'm not going to contest a thing. Because every line item is paid in full. So I love. And what if my love cost me my reputation because an atheist calls me an idiot? So what if my love cost me a relationship because I won't have sex with my boyfriend anymore? What if my love costs me a little bit out of my paycheck every month? What if my love costs me my life because I won't stand down with an ISIS member with a gun to my brain and say, no, Jesus is really Lord? Whatever. I don't care. My bill is paid, y'all. And I just love. It's so simple. I'm not going to tell you for 1 second that it's easy, but it is so stinking simple. The question you have got to ask yourself tonight is if you were sitting at this dinner table and Jesus said, all right, pay attention, I got a story for you. 2 people owed a debt. One was big, one was little. Both of them were forgiven. Which do you think would love him more? The issue is not trying to figure out whether you're the big one or the little one. The issue in your mind should be, oh my gosh, if I am not loving Jesus with everything I have, maybe I don't exactly take responsibility for just as much of my jacked upness as I should be right now. And maybe I've confused just how radical the love and grace of Jesus actually is, thinking that somehow I've earned it or I deserve it. Nope. So I love. And so will you. It's not more complicated than this. The story is not complicated. Jesus set this woman free. He set her free. And she loved. Let's pray. Father, your good news seems way too good to be true sometimes. I know I put on a good show for other people, but I know you see the real me. I know you've seen my pride. I know you've seen my lust and my anger. I know you've seen my greed and my jealousy. I know you've seen it all. You see me at my best. You see me at my worst. But I deeply want to thank you that you would love me long before I would ever love you back. And that you would freely pay my bill to simply give me the chance to love you and others. Father, for my brothers and sisters, for all of our friends here, I'm asking that the weight of this amazing good news would fall on us. I'm asking for everyone here that's been carrying around the shame of their past, that forgiveness would flood into this room, into our minds, into our hearts, into our souls. Jesus, for those of us here that, like Simon the Pharisee, don't think we're that bad, or don't think our bill is that long, but find ourselves being very selfish and unloving. Jesus, I'm just simply asking that you would kindly show us exactly how Bill our big is and exactly how great your love is. Jesus, would you let the cross vividly remind us tonight of what our sin cost. Not so that we would be guilted or shamed or manipulated into doing what you want us to do, but so that we could be free to love you the way you've already loved us. Jesus, help us to simply return the love that you've lavished upon us. Help us to stay away from the legalism that wants to make this about anything but just returning a love that has extravagantly been given to us. Help us to live without the shame and the self-justification, the self-righteousness and comparison games that everyone else in this world plays, God. Help us to live in the freedom of knowing that our debt has been paid, that all that we are, we owe to you. And let us simply live a life of worship and love and gratitude that pleases you and blesses you back even one small amount for how you've blessed us. We love you, Jesus. We love you. We love you. Everything that we do, we want it to be in love for you. Everything that we do, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Let's just take a brief moment. I get the deep sense that there's many of you really wrestling tonight because you identify with this woman. You have a past of pain. But I deeply believe with all my heart that your path to freedom is owning up to your sin so that you can receive your healing. What was done to you is not your fault. And Jesus wants to heal that. But Jesus wants to humanize you and return to you the dignity that was once robbed by holding you responsible for your choices, so that you can be free and free indeed. I know there might be some sensitive stories out there for many of you, so I'm not going to ask you to stand up or raise a hand. But if that's you, I want to specifically pray for you. And I would even invite you after the service to find a friend, maybe find a campus minister or a pastor here. Find someone that maybe can pray for you. But Father, I'm asking that right now, in the name of Jesus, I'm asking for your healing to come over lives that have been hurt and violated, for everyone that has been deeply wounded and treated as less than the beautiful sons and daughters that they are. I'm asking, God, that you would, in this moment, freely offer up forgiveness and healing. God, help us to let go of our pain so that we can receive forgiveness and healing. And Jesus, set us free to once again be able to choose and live free from our past. God, let anyone that's just had a chokehold over our lives, God, let them fall away so that we can be embraced by you. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for your love and grace.
Thanks for joining us. Visit our website at pearlside.org for more.